You are now watching people's opinions on popular topics.
Well, to be honest, not really right now.
Frogger, I hear, is the latest when I listen to the radio.
Yeah, he's definitely out.
I started the 7th of last month protesting.
You want this another? Okay.
So, what's your name and what brings you out here today?
My name is John Pacheco. I'm a, you can call after my regular job, you can call me a Catholic activist. And my concern here is, like most Canadians, we're afraid of the attacks on our civil liberties. We're afraid of our attacks on freedom of association, and from a religious perspective, the right to worship is the proverbial canary in a coal mine. So because the people of faith are the ones that meet regularly every Sunday and in bigger numbers. So among the whole population of Canada, we're the first ones to be affected the most in these kind of lockdowns. And most of our churches are shut down. We see pastors being arrested, being harassed, and it's split our communities. And that's very unfortunate. This has divided Canadian society like no other issue has. We see the traditional boundaries of political differences be almost erased overnight, where you're rubbing shoulders with people that you would otherwise not rub shoulders with, which is kind of an interesting experience, but it's also very humbling. And I think that we've been very complacent as a Canadian society over the last decades, that we've taken our liberties for granted, and now, as we're asleep, the government, and there's been John Paul II called it a veiled and subtle totalitarianism that's been creeping, and that was almost 20 years ago now, and that has creeped into our country, and people are just they're it's almost like, excuse the expression, but they're almost drugged. They don't understand that our freedoms, with these vax passes, they could be taken from us overnight. Like not able, like from a faith perspective, if I want to go to mass, and the government comes down on the bishops and says, well, all your congregants have to have either show vax passes or they make you wear masks, and it's totally unacceptable because it's dividing us, and that is really, really frightening. So for someone like me who refuses to take those vaccines, and every day that goes by, more and more evidence is coming out that those vaccines are very, very dangerous from, reputable virologists, reputable scientists, doctors. And if I refuse to take those vaccines and I refuse to wear a mask, where does that leave me as a person who wants to express their faith with my community? It's discriminatory, and it's horrendous. It's dividing families. And so I'm out here, and I've called a number of Catholics here in Ottawa to come out and pray, to voice our support with our fellow Canadians, and also to pray for a lifting of these lockdowns and assaults on our civil liberties.
So let's start off. Do you think the lockdown has infringed upon any of our charter rights?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, how about the right to make a living? I just saw a report today, a peer-reviewed study that the masks don't do any good. There's no scientific basis for them, and I'm just amazed that politicians, the health establishment has just gone along with all of this without following their own rules of evidence. And a vaccine normally takes 10 years to approve, and here we are, within a matter of a year and a bit. Forcing these vaccines, shutting down businesses, destroying livelihoods. I've made this point many times before. The family is the greatest inoculation against government overreach. Family and small business, because those two entities represent independence. And to the extent that those two cells of a vibrant democracy are protected, is the extent that we protect our freedoms. When those two institutions are undermined, then you are looking at a really frightening scenario of a state that will infringe on our rights, take away everything, and then we become dependent on it. And it's not what Canada is about. That's not what we fought our wars for. That is against the very fabric of this great country.
I've talked to some Christians, and the Bible says that you're supposed to follow the law of the land unless it contradicts with the Bible. Do you think the lockdowns contradict with the Bible?
Well, yes, because I think ultimately we are before the state. Like we are faithful. You know, Saint Thomas More in the Catholic tradition, before he was beheaded by King Henry VIII, says, "I'm the king's good servant, but God's first." So, in other words, you know, Christians are like all citizens supposed to obey lawful authority, and that stands as binding on all Christians. However, like anything, that rule, that moral law is not absolute, especially when that law contradicts greater truths, and the greater truth that we are being attacked on is the dignity of the human person and our freedoms, legitimate freedoms, without sufficient evidence being shown. And that's what we're dealing with here. There's a balance in everything, right? There's a balance of protecting public health, but there's also a balance of protecting our civil rights. To shut down churches and to restrict services to 10 people, or to shut down businesses when they take reasonable precautions, is outrageous, and we've allowed that to happen. And more Canadians got to speak up, stand up, and assert our rights as Canadian citizens.
Well, upon saying that, why do you think there aren't more Christians out here?
Well, I think it's like the whole cultural malaise that we're going through as a country as well. We've lost the sense of, you know, Jesus says that, you know, if you lose the salt, right, of your faith, well, what good is it? What good is if you lose the flavor of the salt, then what good is it? And I think that has largely happened to a good part of the Christian community, the Catholic community in this country. It's a shame, because as we can see, as the Christian faith in Canada, which was basically the founding faith of this country, built it up, made it so great, as it starts to wane and be watered down, is to the extent that we start to lose our freedoms as Canadians. Because at the end of the day, it's the Christian faith that helps undergird not just the Christian faith, but it has a foundational element to it, to Western democracies, that if we don't assert the fundamental truths of Christianity, one of which is the freedom of association, the dignity of the human person, and the right not to be coerced by civil authority against our will, you know, it's going to be dark times for this country.
What are your final thoughts on freedom rallies?
Well, it's like anything. You know, social media, Facebook, they want to shut down dissenting voices for a reason, and they know. And just like the communists back in the day knew that if one person or a group of people start to speak out, and it starts to resonate with what people really know deep down is the matter, but they're too afraid, they're too hesitant. They don't want to break any relationships. They cower, and if they can see a ray of hope, just like in Poland with John Paul II and the Polish Catholics in that country, and that back in 1979 under Solidarity, if they see a movement, they might, you know, the state and some of these censorious and totalitarian elites might get nervous. And so, yeah, they are afraid of these rallies. These rallies are so important because they show Canadians that they don't need to be afraid, that they can come out and they can make a difference.
Well, thank you very much for your time.
You're very welcome.
You got nothing else to add?